Welcome to Nature Therapy Online. Hello friends, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Nature Therapy Online podcast. My name is Stephen McCabe, and I'm an ecotherapist living in Midlothian in Scotland. And my podcast is all about connecting to nature for our well-being and happiness, and for the good of our mental health, and also for the good of the earth itself, also because people who love nature and feel good when they're out in nature and whose mental health benefits from connecting with nature more are also kinder to nature. And I think we can all agree that the human race needs to be a lot kinder to nature than we have been for a long time. So for me, ecotherapy is something that is beneficial to everybody, but not least you, dear listener, and us as human beings as well. So I guess sometimes the thing that grabs our attention with nature, or connects us to nature, is when we feel good, and is when we acknowledge that we are a part of it and we're not this separate machine almost, that just consumes and takes from the earth and treats the earth like something we're not a part of. I think one of the most beautiful things about ecotherapy is having that realization that I'm a part of this. I'm a little part of this. I'm a small creature like all the other small creatures around me, and this is all really a great big mystery. And for me, that's what can be so powerful about connecting with nature. And that leads me on to the topic of this week's podcast, this month's podcast, I should say. I'm still in the habit of saying this week's podcast after the first season, which ran for I can't remember exactly how many episodes, 40-ish, I think, and was weekly. I now record them monthly, and I record bigger and longer episodes. So if I say weekly from time to time, folks, and you hear me say that and I don't correct myself, just ignore me. I'm getting a wee bit older now. I'm forgetting things very easily. I'm saying untruths and things that are not relevant anymore just because they're how I used to do things. So that's where we are in life right now. So ignore that. Where was I before I got seriously sidetracked? I was talking about the theme of this month's episode, which is spirituality and nature. It's a massive, massive topic, and it's something that I've touched on in my previous shorter weekly episodes. I did an episode specifically on Zen and nature. As a lot of you know who listen regularly, I'm a practicing Zen Buddhist, and this is a big part of my nature connection. And we are going to touch on Zen Buddhism in this episode, but I wanted to create an episode that was a lot broader than just my own perspective, really, on spirituality and nature, because something that I've really come to appreciate the more that I've been working as an ecotherapy practitioner and meeting other ecotherapy practitioners and seeing more and more clients over the last year is how spirituality comes up time and time again, without me necessarily bringing it. In fact, it's not something that I bring to my client work unless clients bring it up themselves. But what's really fascinating to me is how people come from so many different perspectives, spiritual perspectives, that is, and yet we can all find this deep appreciation of the awesomeness of everything around us through so many different paths, you know. So for some people, the path might be Buddhism. For some people, it may be an earth-based religion. For some people, it may be Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism or you know, I'm in danger of trying to reel off and list every religion I can think of right now, and I'm not going to do that successfully. So you get my point. You know, there are people who describe themselves as having a spiritual practice but don't put any religious definition on it. And that's extremely valid. You know, for some people, nature itself is spirituality, you know, just the connecting with the awe of all this life that grows and walks and flies and makes all of this noise and has all of this presence, all of this just constant change and movement and color and vibrancy that's all around us is so awesome. And yet we're so lost in our everyday lives, you know, which happens to us all. But we can be so lost in our everyday lives that we forget just to stop and to look and to listen and to take in all of our senses what's happening around us, to look at our own bodies and to see this miracle of growth, this moving mass of organs and skin that's just appeared. You know, we have just appeared from the earth, from the sea, and we're here, and it's incredible. And it comes up so often when I'm working with people, and I love how I feel this connection to what people are talking about, regardless of what kind of spiritual practice they're bringing. So, I suppose to explain what I mean more about that is, you know, for me, it was Zen Buddhism that was my pathway. You know, I didn't pay any attention to nature for my whole adult life until my late 30s. And I'm only talking about 4 years ago, really. Actually, four years ago in the summer, almost probably exactly to this this time that I'm recording this podcast. I started to practice mindfulness in my local park, and it was only because I was very aware that I wasn't living in the now, and I heard that, you know, this was a practice that could tune me into my surroundings more and to the life that I felt I was missing, and everything just became alive around me by starting a practice where I let go of my thoughts. I saw the beauty and the reality of everything else around me that was that was just there, practically waving at me like, "Hi, remember us, remember trees, remember the wild animals you used to adore finding as a child. Remember all of this that's around you." And even though that has been my way in and my spiritual practice that brought me to ecotherapy, I've really come to appreciate other people's pathways, because that connection to nature feels exactly the same regardless of how we get there. You know, that awe that we feel when we connect with nature. So this episode, I hope, will begin to scratch the surface a little bit of this massive topic, of nature and spirituality. So I lay my cards on the table and say this is not going to be about representation of the world's spiritual practices and religions. That's not what I'm doing today. It's not what I'm able to do. I would love to do it, but I think I would probably need to dedicate an entire podcast just to that topic. I say that every time I do a podcast episode, because nature is just so vast that any topic you bring, you know, last month it was music and spirituality. You know, I really only scratched the surface of that topic, and this month I will be scratching the surface. And you know, but I think sometimes to scratching the surface of any topic is such an important thing to do. Not to be intimidated by the size of this topic is something that I fought with myself a little bit. I was like, if I have somebody speaking from a Christian perspective, then I really should have somebody from a Hindu perspective. I should try and do everything. And actually, it wasn't ever going to happen like that. So my invitation for you with this episode is to listen to the voices I have gathered. And I have recordings from 3 people from 3 different spiritual perspectives, and I'm also going to share some of my own perspective, not about Buddhism this time, but actually about another practice which is very close to my heart, which is tarot. And it's something I haven't really talked about on this podcast before. So there's going to be 4 perspectives: Catholicism, Druidry, Buddhism, and tarot. And these are in no way representative of the vastness of the various ways that spiritual practice meets nature, or brings us close to nature. But what I would really like is that if you are listening and you have a spiritual practice of your own, and you feel it wasn't really touched upon, which is very likely in this hour or so, however long this episode will be, please do go to the web page for this podcast, which is naturetherapyonline.net/podcast/spirituality. So that's naturetherapyonline.podcast/spirituality, and post some comments on there, and share things in the comments. Share any experiences you have, any links that you have, maybe to inspiring videos that touch on your spiritual connection with nature, your practice, your religion. It would be really lovely to have more people from this vast community of our earth sharing there, because I'm very aware that we're not going to cover all of that in this podcast. So that's my rather long, I think, footnote on the topic of the vastness of this. But I would like to go on and introduce my first guest voice. So how I went about this month is I asked 3 people who I know who have very different spiritual practices to share with me anywhere between 3 or 4 minutes to 10 minutes of their experiences and how their spiritual practice links with nature. And this first voice is from the incredible Harriet Sams, and Harriet is a druid, and she's an ecotherapy practitioner, and I will share you some links to her website after we've heard her speak. So I'm going to hand over to Harriet and let her introduce herself and her practice with you. So here is Harriet Sams.
I have about 5 minutes to tell you about Druidry and its earth-based connection and how it helps me to be an earth-based spiritual practitioner. So Western esoteric mystery school of Druidry is a spirituality, and it's not a religion, in that it's not a received religion. It doesn't have any dogmatic texts or leaders as such. It's a deeply experiential and active-based spiritual practice which unifies people with a core understanding that the earth is the place where all sense of spirituality, sense of understanding of who one's own being is, a sense of connection to other humans and to non-human beings who also inhabit this planet. So essentially, because there is no dogma and there is no texts, we all have to agree on very few things. One of them is, as I said, that the earth is where all the teaching comes from. That's where we go to when we want to understand who we are and how we practice. It gives us a sense of belonging, it gives us a sense of conscientious living, and it gives us a sense of understanding the more than human, the more than individual worlds. So I came to it through prehistoric archaeology. I'd been very connected to the ancestors, as it were, and the land, and in my own understanding of walking the land, I knew that there was more that was being spoken to me than just what I was excavating. There was consciousness, there was a connectivity to the land that I was feeling. So Druidry for me really helped me understand what that was, and that I wasn't mad, and that it's actually real, that there is a consciousness that's there, that I was holding on to and connecting to. So very broadly, Druidry in the West is taught in 3 levels, but then none of them are any better or hierarchical than the others. They're just a progressive level of initiation. And it's an initiation school, so it's very deeply mystical, very private. It's not secret because things need to be hidden, but it's private because it's sacred information. So the first level is the bardic level, where we learn how to understand our mythology. We learn how to understand how to speak, how to sing, how to be creative, how to allow the flow of what's called Arwen, that creative, juicy space that one gets into when one does anything creative. And we learn how to harness that so that we can be creative in whatever field it can be. Then the next level is the ovate, which would be the healers, the herbalists, the diviners, the people who you go to, the wise woman at the edge of the village. That takes many years potentially of study to know how to be a diviner and a connector to the earth energies around us. And then the final level of initiation is the druid grade, which historically the druids were the advisors, the philosophers, the ones who gazed to the stars for the deeper, wider cosmic reasons for things and looking to the future. And in the modern terms, a druid is someone who is of service, full of service in the community, usually a celebrant or a funeral celebrant of some sort, or someone, maybe an advisor, and who maybe steps into the therapeutic roles. So they're the 3 sort of levels of being a druid. And I personally feel like I sit in the ovate. I'm the sort of healer, diviner, the one who we go to when we've got cuts and bruises and need a cup of tea when something's happened that's tricky, that's difficult. And I often then invite in a third space, which for me is that earth connection. So it'll be, let's go for a walk and let's just see what we find. And so the medicine walking, the medicine woman, that's who I feel I am. I am a trained celebrant and ritualist, and I love that sense of service very much. But really, I feel like my heart is in the plants and healing and energy. But all of it, all aspects, all layers, all initiations help us get connected to our life on this planet, who it is to be us right now, how it is to be alive, how it is to be fully conscious of our responsibilities at this time, not only to ourselves but to the wider non-human communities, and being the voice for those who have no voice, but we can hear them, we can feel them, and we don't turn away, we look towards. And that to me has been the greatest gift of Druidry, that sense that I'm here, I'm present, and my life is of service, and that people do understand that. That's for me my greatest gift of Druidry.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Harriet. And before I go further, I would like to give you the web address for Harriet, and you can work with Harriet or read more about her work here. So I'm going to I'm going to spell this for you because I always pronounce it wrongly. So it's N for nuts, WYFRE dash earth.co. So that's NWYFRE forward dash earth.co. Um, yeah, there's just like so much there that I would love to pick up on. And I'm not sure I know quite where to start with it. But one thing I would like to I would that really struck me is this sense that um, Earth is where the spirituality is. I just, in a nutshell, I think that speaks so many volumes about spirituality and nature for me. I think many of us in the West who've maybe grown up with certain views on what spirituality is, which I think in many ways even Christianity has been grossly misrepresented itself by a lot of elements of Western culture. I think there was very often a sense that spiritual life is something that is there after a physical life, or it's other than a physical life, and it's something that happens perhaps when we die, something that we're going to access at a later time, and that maybe where we are and what's happening with us right now is not so spiritual, or um, is not as powerful as what might be happening in other realms or later on after our deaths come. And this sense that came through so strongly with what Harriet was saying of Earth being where spirituality is, Earth being our teacher, just resonates so strongly with me. And as a Buddhist practitioner, that is the sense that I got when I let my thoughts go, when I was able to let my thoughts go a wee bit, and to see the earth around me. All of a sudden, it was there. Um, this sense that the more than human is important really moved me with Harriet's talk there. And I think as well what I appreciated is there was an education in that for me as well, and I imagine probably for a lot of our listeners as well. I think Druidry is not a practice that we really know very much about, and as Harriet touched upon there, the practices of our ancestors, the practices from ancient times have not been recorded, and in many ways, a lot of earth-based religions are finding that connection again after so many centuries of yeah, our spiritual past in the West being wiped. And it was really beautiful to hear about the Awen, the creative link to spirituality. That's something that we don't link together, is it? You know, Spirituality and our own creativity. They're not things that, at least in the West, we really link together. And yet, I do think that artists of all kinds experience this very deep and beautifully overpowering sense when they're creating, whether it's music or art or poetry, whatever it is. This sense that I'm this being, and I can bring something into creation that wasn't there before, or I can bring elements together and pour something out of me and express something as a living being through me and bring it into existence. It's just a really beautiful and powerful thing. And that theory of the Awen really moved me to hear, because I think for me, I spent many years as a very creative person, but I never considered myself in any way a spiritual person, and that concept ties a lot of things together very nicely for me. I think it helps us to look at the reasons that we create. There's something so alive in that process. I'm also aware as I'm talking, and I kind of knew that this would happen, but I'm going to lay my cards on the table with this, because I think that it's something that stops us from engaging with each other when it comes to issues around spirituality, and probably culture as well, and a lot of other things that there's a part of me that's kind of cringing as I talk, because I'm thinking, am I just grossly misrepresenting everything that Harriet's just said? You know, did I understand it right, correctly? Did I am I sounding like a fool to anyone who's a druid out there who's listening to me? And am I just getting all of this? Is this not? Did I really misunderstand what the Awen even was? You know, and I suppose I wanted to just reflect on that, because I think sometimes that's a barrier to us talking. And if I have misunderstood anything, you know what, like, I think it's okay, and I would like someone just to flag that up to me and let me know if that's the case. But it's not the point. I think the point to my primary point here is that, you know, we need to connect with this planet for ourselves and for the earth, and spiritual practices, I think, are key to that. I really believe that, you know. And if us talking about each other's practices feels difficult and we're afraid of getting things wrong, then just we need to take the risk of just getting things wrong, and talking anyway, because that's the only way we'll get things right. So I'm completely digressing there. But I felt like it was relevant. I prefer these days to kind of shine a light on my awkwardness rather than sit with it and suffer quietly. So a few more things on what Harriet said there. I mean, I could do a whole podcast responding just to Harriet, but I've got a few. I've got two other clips that are equally as beautiful and inspiring to share with you folks. So I don't know the exact thing that Harriet said there, but it was something like, "My heart is in the plants and in healing energy." And I mean, that's just gorgeous, isn't it? You know, my heart is in the plants. You know, we're here in everything around us. And I felt two things come up for me when Harriet said that. One was the sense of love for the plants, you know, for all this life that grows, you know, that the way we express in our human language, my heart is with something. But I also felt something almost physical, like, you know, my heart is in the plants. You know, everything is changing and forming, and the things that make up my body right now, you know, might one day go back to the earth and actually become part of the plants. My heart may be part of a plant one day. Perhaps a tree will grow from somewhere where I'm buried, and I don't find those thoughts scary like I used to, or uncomfortable. I think they're beautiful, and I think that's one of the things that the that my link to nature has taught me, to not be so afraid of my own death, and not to be afraid of what might happen to my body in this form that I have here. So yeah, thanks Harriet for that. Very beautiful. And final thing I wanted to reflect on, it was just, you know, how, when Harriet said something like, "How is it to be alive right now?" You know, that's so key. It's what we don't do in life, and I think it's what nature teaches us, in a way, more than anything else, how to be alive right here, right now, by looking at what's happening, by listening to the sound of the birds, by just watching what they're doing right now, this moment. Right now, I just had a little crazy fly there. I don't know if you heard it. And there's also a wee little bird outside the window. Don't know what kind of bird it is. I'm also looking out over, I'm sitting in my attic and my dog Euro is asleep next to me. I can hear the summer just being summer outside, you know, the insects, the birds. I can see the leaves on the top of the trees outside my window. I've never really noticed the shapes before. You know, there's a tree in front of me. It looks like a hand making a peace sign. So I just want to thank you again, Harriet, for that invitation, because that's how it is for me to be alive right now as I record this. And that's something I would invite you all to do, folks, when this podcast is finished, or even as you're listening. Just notice how it is to be alive right now and let nature show you the way. So I'm going to move on and I'm going to share with you a recording by Jerry Simcock. And Jerry is a practicing Zen Buddhist in the Soto Zen tradition. Jerry goes along to the same meetings that I do. He's part of the same Sangha as me up here in the Lothians in Scotland. And I really wanted to have some input from another Zen practitioner on links between the spiritual practice and nature, because it's something that I've talked about a lot, but I've never really heard so much of from other Zen practitioners. So I asked Jerry if he would send some thoughts to me, and he sent me the following recording, which is, there's so much food for thought here. There's some very lovely and inspiring, very powerful thoughts here. So I hope you get as much out of it as I did, and I'm going to hand you over to Jerry Simcock.
Hello, here I am in our garden, sitting on the step of the hut where I meditate. I'm Jerry. I've been a Zen practitioner for the past 6 or 7 years, and so really quite a novice. And I have been asked to talk a little about Zen and nature. I think I'll start by talking a little about spiritual practice and the relationship with nature. I'm not sure how consistent my thoughts will be on this as I talk, but I hope to offer something. So my relationship between Zen and nature, well, I have had a lifelong interest in the outdoors and in nature, and only recently discovered Zen. But Zazen has been a real gift. It has really helped in terms of helping me tackle some difficulties I had a while back, but also in coming to terms, in appreciating life and where I am. So in Zen we talk a lot about non-duality, how everything is one, how everything is connected. So in effect, nature and Zen are one. We are nature, made by natural forces and part of all nature. And we talk about, in Zen, big mind and small mind. And it's a bit unfortunate because with Zen we're trying to let go of conceptualizations. But at the same time, there's a necessity to understand and explain and to communicate with others. The big mind really is a way of describing everything in the universe, the boundless nature of things, the ever-changing, ever-moving, ever-shifting nature of what we find ourselves part of. What we, with our consciousness, which in Zazen comes to show us a kind of how boundless and limitless everything is, including our consciousness. Small mind is more to do with the ego, the conceptualization of self, and the naming, labouring, measuring, thinking part of ourselves, the brain work. In Zazen, we try to let go of small mind and simply open up to just being, just sitting, joining the flow of the myriad things and their interconnection. In time with Zazen, I have been able to experience just this simple flow, just this being nature. Open awareness, to be aware of the flow of life in our bodies and in all that is around us, is what happens, or what seems to happen when I sit Zazen for long periods. We have no control of this. It's just what is occurring, and as my teacher says, it is sufficient. It happens without us making it happen. A large part of us has nothing to do with our small mind nature. It is just what is occurring. The flow in our blood, the intake of oxygen, cell production, and so on. So the small mind part, the me, the other aspect of me, part of big mind, tends to simply be aware of what is around me. Of course, the I part of me is necessary. The I part of me really looks very closely at what is happening around me, and the response to nature is to find it fascinating and joyous, and in some ways, which is unfortunate, we see it as very separate from ourselves. Even in appreciation of nature, there's a certain duality. But I'm getting a bit convoluted here, so I'll just carry on. My wife and I have made this garden. Well, to say that is probably wrong. We've let this garden come into being. We've given it assistance, and we've deliberately planted it for bees and other pollinators. And over the years, it has grown and become what it is now. There are more insects, more birds, more plants. We also help run and volunteer for a charity which manages 4.5-acre walled garden. And here we have a flower garden, shrub borders, an orchard, willow grown for reeving, and wild areas, the bigger part of it, to encourage biodiversity and let nature do its thing. trying not to tamper too much with it. Zazen, Zen, helps me appreciate all of this, so the I, the small mind, plays a part in it, contributes to the whole. I'm always aware in both gardens of the limitlessness and spaciousness of things, of the comings and goings, of the changes. All is change, it's constant change, and we are part of that. I feel it's so important for people, especially now when so many have been suffering with lockdowns and with COVID. And part of our walled garden project is to make this nature available to people who maybe are suffering, maybe have had some mental health issues or some physical issues. And our experience is that people find this place very soothing, and they soon connect and appreciate. And we also run a garden therapy session, which is partly meditation, partly mindful walking, partly observing and walking with open awareness, and then of course tasks. So there is joy to be found, there is appreciation to be found, there is sufficiently, and I often have this feeling that I can just fall back. The I part of me can fall back into nature. Our minds are nature. Of course, observing ourselves and nature is not all beauty. There is aggression, there are fights, there are territories being defended, there are battles. One life thrives on another, one life thrives on another death. Life and death are very evident to us as gardeners. We deal with life and death, with the dying down, the compost, the earth is made from decomposition, and the world, nature renews and grows from this. So now, I think my time is up, and I'm afraid I've been a little muddled, but I hope I've got something across. I'm going to sit zazen now and let these thoughts go, and maybe in part of my big mind, or the big mind, a blackbird will sing, a bee will buzz, the rain will fall, the pigeons might come and move the rocks around on the roof as they often do. Who knows? Thank you.
And thank you, Jerry. I think there is so much that we can all recognize in what Jerry shared there on so many levels. And I think this is why I've really enjoyed pulling this podcast together, because there's something so down to earth about spiritual practices that we don't that we don't recognize. And I think Jerry pointed to so much about the here and the now and the earth and our bodies and the nature around us and the universe. What is here and what is happening? What is in front of us? What we're living right now? You know, this I'm coming back to so much with what Jerry shared there, you know, this sense that spirituality isn't this thing that's other than us, and it isn't this thing that's out there. It's not something for the future. It's not something, it could be something from another realm in a lot of ways. I'm not denying that, but it's not, if that's the case, it's not only that, it's also here. I want to share, before I do get too enthusiastic and forget, I want to share with you the links for that the project that Jerry is involved in, that he was telling you about. So if you are in the Lothians, and you're interested in the project, the garden therapy project, please go to growingatgilmerton.org. That's growingatgilmerton.org. And you can also find Jerry on Twitter at WildSeedZen. That's WildSeedZen on Twitter. And what was so interesting there is that I had no idea that Jerry was actually running basically an ecotherapy project. You know, this was not on my agenda here. It wasn't why I asked Jerry. In fact, I'd spoken with the Reverend Fabian at the Sangha in Portobello. So that's the Portobello Buddhist Priory. And I'd initially asked Fabian if he could talk, but he's really poorly at the moment. So do get well soon, Reverend Fabian, if you're listening. And he suggested Jerry, and I didn't realise that Jerry had this kind of project going. So it just goes to show you, you know, the power of this practice of Zen Buddhism, because I'm not the only person who it's led in this direction. Although I'm not sure if Jerry was doing this before or after his Buddhist practice, I don't know, but they do seem very, very linked, which is not surprising to me. You know, this sense of appreciating life where we are, but this touching on this big mind that Jerry mentioned, and interconnection with everything, boundless universe. You know, these things that the huge concepts, but I think we all have these moments of big mind, whether we are spiritual practitioners or not. A lot of us will have some experience of looking up at the stars and thinking, wow, what am I and what's going on here? And I think what Jerry touched upon there is how that awe of the universe itself is something that we cultivate in Zen practice. I love the links to change, how powerful constant change is, and you know that is something. Impermanence is a key part of Buddhist practice, and yet it's also a very practical teaching about nature. Nothing shows us constant change more than nature, you know. For me, all of these key theories in Zen also point to the way of the earth and the way of nature. There's something very, very practical and very rooted in it. So I want to thank you very much, Jerry, for sharing your thoughts, and please, you didn't ramble at all. I don't know I forgot where it was at the beginning or at the end, where you said you felt you talked too much or something, but really you didn't. Every moment of it was really powerful for me. So thank you very much. Now I'm going to move on to our last guest speaker, and then I'm going to talk a little bit, not much, not too much, but a wee bit about tarot at the end as well. But before I do, I'm going to introduce Sarah Crew. Sarah is an incredible poet, and she is also a practicing Catholic, and she describes her Catholicism as a bespoke version of Catholicism, as you'll hear, which I love. So I'm going to hand you over to Sarah and let her share her thoughts. So over to you, Sarah.
So you asked about the relationship between my spiritual practice, which in my case is Catholicism, or any other aspect of personal spirituality, and how this is connected with nature. This was a really interesting question to consider, as my initial reaction when you asked me was, does my, shall we say, bespoke version of Catholicism really have any links to nature? But then when I started to think about how I link my walks, which is my primary form of exercise and also a major part of my mental health care, to the Catholic faith, and it turns out that the two are actually pretty inextricably linked. So I live in Liverpool, specifically in Anfield, and the bonus point of living in this area is that it's walking distance to Everton Brow, which provides not only the most beautiful view of the city, but also the river. At the highest point, you can see what I refer to as my personal three graces. I say personal because the term three graces is usually used to refer to the Liver buildings, the Cunard building, and the Port of Liverpool building on the riverfront. But to me, it's Trinity of the Metropolitan Cathedral, the Parish Church of St. Francis Xavier, and the Anglican Cathedral. Now, I always find the latter fails to move me from the inside, which is inevitably some kind of deep Catholic bias. But from the outside, it's just absolutely stunning, completely breathtaking, and 1,000,000% one of the most impressive buildings you can ever imagine. As for St. Francis Xavier, it's particularly special to me as it was the church I was baptised in as a baby. And again, it's a proper old school church with such poetic value, as the poet Gerard Manley Hopkins was a parish priest there. So what I like to do is, whenever I'm on top of Everton Brow, I always say Hail Mary as a thank you to Mary for my loved ones and everything I have, which in this context is having the privilege of being alive and looking down on this gorgeous, glittering river that just fills me with pride every time I look at it. Sticking with the Virgin Mary, one of the things that keeps me tied to Roman Catholicism is the centre stage that a woman is given. It's not that I see God as a man, I see God as a force beyond gender, but so many other branches of Christianity refuse to give her and the saints any kind of iconography, whereas I'm extremely partial to it. And another aspect of spirituality that is often attributed to female rather, is the moon. I love the moon. It's all powerful, connected to the tides, connected to women. And so again, whenever I see her, be it on a walk or simply from a kitchen window, I always say, Hail Mary, Mother Moon. And I'm momentarily awestruck by how we are ultimately these small little worker bees on an enormous planet under this awesome moon. It's very grand and extremely helpful to just take that moment of actually each day is new. It might not be worth stressing over such small infinitesimal things. The final one I'd like to mention is part of my walk to work. On my journey there, I walked past Newsham Park. A few months ago, for the first time ever, I spotted some green parakeets flying over. Now, these are particularly important to me, as usually these are the species only spotted in London, a place I love deeply. However, Newsham Park's main significance in my life right now is that it contains my son's school, which has St. Francis of Assisi in the title. For anyone who's familiar with St. Francis of Assisi, he rejected a life as a spoiled boy of Italian aristocracy for a life of few possessions and caring exclusively for the poor. He was also a fervent lover of animals and believed nature was a reflection of God. A cracking saint, if it's not sacrilegious to put it in such Scouse terms. So each day when I pass my son's school sign, I always make a sneaky sign of the cross and say, St. Francis of Assisi, please look after me boy. He seems like a safe pair of hands, and combining prayer with a daily journey seems like as perfect a setting as I could get, as it's not just for secluded moments, it's a continuous part of who I am, like walking, like breathing.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. It was very beautiful for me to listen to. As someone who went to a Catholic school when I grew up and has found a spiritual path as I've gotten older, although not with Catholicism, there was something very healing, I think, about those links that Sarah brought up between her faith and her practice and nature and the moon, and all of these things that we, may not initially associate with Catholicism or Christianity more broadly, but I think really go back to that point I made at the start of this show, which is, a genuine spiritual practice points to the amazingness and the awesomeness of everything that is around us right here, right now. Sarah Crew actually is she's a family member of mine. She's my sister-in-law and one of my best friends on this earth. So it was especially beautiful to hear to hear those words and hear how Sarah relates to the moon, especially. I've got a very big love of the moon myself, and I think I think it's there in all practices, all spirituality, all genuine spirituality is pointing to the miracle of what is here and what is here right now, this life that we have. And so much of that came through with Sarah's discussion. I loved what Sarah was saying about gratitude and finding that in prayer, in moments, in nature, looking at views and expressing that gratitude, and gratitude is such a powerful practice, and we don't see it as a spiritual practice, but I think it's something that we've lost in, I think in a lot of cultures and a lot of societies, perhaps, where we've lost our spiritual connection. We forget to be grateful for being alive, and we forget to be grateful for nature. And certainly in my own Buddhist practice, gratitude has been one of the big turning points, I guess. Practicing gratitude, I should say, has been a big turning point in my practice. Just having those exact same moments, or I should say very similar moments to what Sarah described there, of being mindful in nature and letting my thoughts go and just seeing the beauty around me and just whispering a thank you. I loved what Sarah said about seeing God as a force beyond gender, and the links between Mary and the moon, the expressions of the feminine. I think that there were a lot of things coming up there that I imagine some people from pagan practice might relate to, especially with the link between the feminine and the moon. Hail Mary, Mother Moon. That was just gorgeous, So, these things that have come up in all three discussions from three very different religious practices, linked together in this thread of being here now. When Sarah said each day is new, I felt like this was something that came up with Harriet, and it was something that came up with Jerry, and it's something that comes up for me a lot, and I hear it with people of different practices and faiths all the time, So it's just so lovely to hear that. And I once heard, I don't know who it was who said it and where it came from. Perhaps somebody can enlighten me on that. But I heard once that the different paths that we take on a spiritual road are a bit like people climbing a mountain, but from different sides. So different paths will appeal to us, but when we are able to get to a point of our practice where we really touch something deep, and we really feel like we are able to appreciate the life that we have, which for me is what it's all about. It's often the point where we're perhaps getting a wee bit closer to the part, the top, maybe the top section of that mountain where we can see the full view. And we also get closer and closer together. Maybe the deeper that we practice and the more genuinely we practice, whatever it is we're practicing, the closer we get to other faiths and the closer we get to other practices. Because really, I heard so much in Sarah and with Harriet today that for me could have been Buddhism, really. So I just want to say thanks to Sarah. It's very beautiful, and thank you again to Jerry and to Harriet for sharing your thoughts. And I hope that you've found this inspiring so far, folks. And to close this topic, I'm going to talk a little bit about something I've never really spoken about on the podcast before, and that is tarot. So I'm not going to give you a full blow-by-blow description of every tarot card, or I'm not even going to give you a deep introduction to the system itself of the cards. But I felt like it was important to acknowledge the links between tarot and nature. and maybe to dispel some ideas about what tarot actually is. Because something I've come to realize quite recently, actually, is that tarot played a big part in bringing me closer to nature. I've often credited Buddhism with that, and it certainly was where the aha moment came, practicing mindfulness outdoors in nature and practicing Buddhism, not just practicing mindfulness, but the whole package was a big aha moment for me with nature. But for years before I practiced in the Zen tradition, I was reading tarot for years, maybe almost, I don't know, 15 years. And it's something I would go to and leave for a while and return to. And recently I was casting my mind back about a lot of the times where I've sat with my cards in front of me and I've been staring at those beautiful images, the deep symbolism, and reflecting on how much nature there is in tarot. The four main suits of swords and pentacles and cups and wands. I'm always a bit nervous when I say that because I always seem to get stuck and forget one, even though it's something I do every day. So well done me. I didn't do it. It didn't happen then. I got the wands, but they represent the main forces or elements, if you like, of earth, air, fire, and water. Not in that order, by the way, that I read them out. And for me, I would sit, and I still do, although my tarot practice personally is more of a meditative thing at the moment, but I used to journal a lot. And just to dispel any myths out there, tarot is not about predicting the future. It can be for some people, and I'm not knocking anything here, folks. I think there is a lot of great mysteries in life that we don't understand, and tarot can help us tap into those. So fortune telling is something that people do with tarot cards. I personally love fortune telling, and I'm not going to knock it. I never. It's not what I do with tarot myself, but I've got respect for it. Having said that, tarot is not just a tool that we can use to predict the future. And in fact, I would say the vast majority of people don't. It's something that we can use to explore our lives. This is a deck of cards that tells the story of life. Each card represents there's Yoro there flapping his ears. It represents a stage in life that we go through. It represents moments and dilemmas that we all experience. And when people, I think, criticize the tarot for having generalized meanings that, perhaps apply to all of us, for me, that's the beauty. These cards developed from human hands. They weren't developed by one person, at least as far as we know. They have moved through the centuries, and they tell the story of life. It's when you look at the major arcana, we start with this character, the fool, who moves through these 21 images, which are called the major arcana cards, and they will probably be the cards that you recognize if you don't know tarot. So things like the devil or the empress, the moon, and there is so much nature in these cards. They've grown out of nature like everything else has, and even all of the early decks have so many scenes behind the main images. There's mountains, there's water, there's flowers, there are things growing, and nothing is accidental in a tarot image. It all has symbolism and meaning, and I just wanted to throw that out there, that for me, I've begun to recognize how these cards that I was sitting with for years, during many years when I didn't have an obvious nature connection, I now see as a really important part of my growth and my path towards where I am today, being an eco practitioner for a job, and just being connected in my daily life and knowing the importance of it. I feel like all those years I was sat indoors. Winter was my favorite month, should I say, season. I think I'm pretty sure winter's a season. Winter was my favorite season for all of my adult life, and it may be yours. That's great. You can be a nature lover and love winter, but I think my point is I didn't like summer. I didn't like the heat. I didn't like the light. I liked to be indoors. And I think that's because I was very internal in how my life was focused. I was very much living my life inside my own head. So part of my coming out of that process, I think, has been looking at these deep and powerful symbols on these cards, laying them out in the winter months and all the months of the year when I didn't have a connection to nature, and meditating with them, meditating on earth, on the air, on fire, on water. And I would recommend anybody who has an appreciation of art and symbolism and spirituality to go and get themselves a deck of tarot cards. You don't have to have any particular beliefs around what they do or don't do. You can just look at it as a tool, as a book of life. You can put the cards down in front of you and they will tell you something about your life. It might not always be something that you want to hear, but there's something very uncanny about pulling out a tarot card with a particular question about your life in mind and seeing it so succinctly represent something about that question and give you some kind of guidance and support. And I believe that it's the nature link that is a big part of that. I think it's a big part of the inspiration. So I want to leave that with you. I can feel I'm getting a wee bit tired. It's been quite a long episode, so I hope I've done tarot justice there. I feel like I'm usually like so passionate when I talk about tarot. I talk about it at the speed of light. I've got so much love and respect for the tarot. So I hope it's come across, even though I've been a wee bit tired and subdued getting to the end of the show there. So really check it out and keep an open mind. And so I'm going to give you a little exercise to do in nature sometime over the next month. I was introduced to this recently by somebody who I work with, and this exercise she calls walk the question, and it's just brilliant. Really simple but so powerful. And how it works is that if you have a question in life that you're struggling with, or there's something going on in life that you would like some guidance and some answers to, you ask nature the question and go for a walk, and you allow the things that you notice around you, the things you find, the scenes that you see, the symbolism around you, give you answers. That's it. And I mean, it's something I've done quite a lot, but I think never really in a formalized way, never really gone with a question before. It's something that I've allowed to unfold naturally, but I think there's something really powerful about asking that question in advance. So I want you to walk a question. I want you to go out in nature, to a park, a forest, the sea, wherever. It doesn't have to be the wildest place on earth. It could be a small city park near where you live. and ask nature a question about your spiritual life. So ask it to reflect something that you need in your spiritual life, and see what you find. See what you're drawn to. If you notice a little bird, watch what it's doing. If you see an interesting pebble on the floor that's catching your eye, pick it up. Read them as signs. Take everything in. Let nature inspire you and tell you something about your life, full stop. Because when I'm talking about a spiritual life, I'm talking about our human lives, because they are spiritual lives. We're here, we're alive. It's not going to be in this form that we have for a very long time. Nature is full of inspiration. You can see this as a spiritual task, or you can also just see it as nature inspiring you about your life. So go outside, go for a walk, ask nature the question, which is, tell me something about my spiritual life. Tell me how I can grow a spiritual life, or show me something that I need to know about my spiritual life. However you want to phrase it. Find what you find. And I'm pretty sure that you will find this a really inspiring exercise. I know that I did. So there you go, folks. There's your little task to do over the next month, or quite a big one actually. And yeah, before I go, if you are in a position to support the podcast and support what I do, please go to patreon.com/nature therapy online. You can give small donations monthly to the podcast, and you also get awesome rewards. And they are pretty good, even if I do say so myself. You can get tarot readings handwritten in the post related to nature. You can get access to our little nature group. It's called The Nest, where a small group of us get together and we just talk about the things that we've found in nature in the last month, the things that have inspired us. It's a really lovely little club. It's a wee little online chat that we have each month, and you're very welcome to join us through Patreon. So if you're willing and in a financial position where you can support the podcast with some pennies each month, it would be much appreciated. And I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to say thank you so much. Remember that you can go to Nature Therapy Online /podcast/spirituality to leave comments on today's episode as well. Thank you so much, folks. Really appreciate you tuning in. Hugs and take care, and bye-bye. Visit me online at naturetherapyonline.net.